Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canale and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. He's a prolific celebrity photographer that has shot the likes of Paul McCartney, Robert Bernstein, Faith Hill, and so many others. From New York City, an award-winning documentary and portrait photographer who has books of his portraits from the era of Studio 54, Paradise Garage, Odyssey, and others. Please welcome to the show, Bill Bernstein. Bill, welcome to Before the Lights.
Oh, thanks, Tommy. Good to be here.
Tell me and my listeners, where does your love of photography come from? Where does that start?
I think it started pretty early in my life. My father was basically a regular businessman. I grew up in a middle-class family in New Rochelle, New York, which is a suburb of New York City. So my father used to go into the city every day to work. But on the weekends, his passion was photography. So as far back as I can remember, when I was old enough to stand, I would go into the darkroom with him and watch him develop film and make prints. And then when I was old enough to stand and hold things, I would actually hold the container that holds the negatives and shake it. He always included me in that. And, I think for me, that was my dad, playing catch with me and taking me to the ball game and doing that kind of stuff, which we never did. But we did have those times in the darkroom. And I just, I just developed a passion myself for photography and a love for it. So actually, after he passed away, I had just gotten out of college and I was kind of pursuing other stuff, graphic arts, that kind of thing. But when he passed away, I thought, I don't want to die with the passion in me, So I decided to just quit my job and become a freelance photographer and see where that took me. And, that was 1976. So, do the math. That's a long time ago.
That's right.
It's all I've ever done. And I love it. And it's been an amazing career. And it's offered me so many opportunities to meet interesting people, to delve into an art form that I love to do. So, I remember I don't shoot with film anymore, but I used to go, when I shot with film, I used to go to the darkroom and spend hours there. And I always felt at home there because it always reminded me of those days, as a child,
It is funny you bring that up. I have a friend of mine who's a photographer. I've interviewed a couple photographers on my show, and everybody refers back to the darkroom days. It's something about that darkroom day that brings photographers. I think there's like a unspoken feeling there with the darkroom.
I think so. I remember, starting usually, late at night, 11 o'clock or something, and going till 4 or 5 or 6 in the morning.
Wow.
And just, totally losing track of time. Totally. There's something very zen about it. You're totally alone with your thoughts and your feelings, and you're doing this thing that, is a craft in a sense. And you come out at the end and you've got something great to look at, hopefully. But it is very meditative. And as much as I love that when it was there, I think when digital came along, and for me, that was around 2000, I'd say 2001, I just went straight to digital. I bought my first digital camera, and I was on the road with Paul McCartney at that time. And I never went back. I never went back to film. I do miss that, those long, long, beautiful nights in the darkroom, but I don't miss the chemicals. I don't miss the problems with the ecology, that kind of thing, the smell on my hands for days, all that kind of stuff. But, aside from that, it's a beautiful craft. It's a beautiful thing to do.
Besides your father, were there any other influences for your photography? Somebody like maybe an Irving Penn or somebody along those lines?
Oh, yeah. Along with my father just having his passion, his bookshelf was stacked with photography books.
Okay.
And he was a real collector of that work. So I used to spend, hours just going through like history of photography books. Richard Avedon was a huge influence on me. As I grew up, as time went on, I got into like Diane Arbus, William Klein. Black and white photography was always fascinating to me because I guess it's when I grew up, that's really what was the most used photography. But Henry Cartier-Bresson and Robert Frank, people like that who really developed the technique for shooting with 35 millimeter cameras, and developed the whole narrative of documentary photography, and art photography, all of that I loved all that stuff.
How did you begin your career at the Village Voice in the 70s? How'd you land that job?
Well, it was actually, like I said, it was around the time my dad passed away. And I had been shooting a lot of stuff on my own, my friends, street scenes, just some like music concerts occasionally. So I'd collected like a portfolio of pictures, but I was also at that time, I wasn't doing photography professionally. I was doing other stuff. I had worked for the Village Voice for a while in the production department. And I was also doing graphic arts at various places, not really feeling like all that connected to it. So when my dad passed away and I decided like, I'm just going to try this, I walked into the Village Voice and I knew the art director at that point. And so I said, can you look at my portfolio and let me know if, I can do anything for the Village Voice, And he looked at it and as he's looking at it, a music critic, Richard Goldstein, came into the room and he said, George Delmerico was the art director, said, who are we going to get to photograph Carlos Santana and Tito Puente tonight at Roseland? And George looked at me and he said, I don't see why Bill Bernstein can't do it. That's my very first job.
What a first gig to get assigned to.
Amazing?
That is amazing.
Shit. Yeah, I was, oh my God. And it was my very first professional assignment. So, the pressure was on to produce something great. And, I sort of knew what I was doing. I knew how to take a picture, but, the whole thing was a little scary, but it worked out.
Do you do research on maybe different cultures or backgrounds or anything of people that you've taken photos of before you've done their portraits?
Oh, sure. Always. If I can, if I have time and, if there's resources out there to research somebody, absolutely. I always did that. I would read up everything I could. I would talk to people, famous people are much easier because there's much more access to their lives,
Right.
But sometimes I'm asked to photograph somebody who's, pretty much an unknown. And so that's a little trickier because you have to sort of find out what this person does and then kind of understand what it is that they do, what's their field about. So you have some reference, because I like to walk into like a portrait session with somebody with some sort of idea or two of what I'm going to do.
Okay.
If I'm shooting you, a podcaster, I want to know something about who you've interviewed. I want to know something about you, where you came from, what your things you like. Are you live in Las Vegas? Are you a Las Vegas guy? I mean, do you go out gambling? Do I want to shoot you at a casino?
No, I'm not a gambler.
Not gambling. Okay. You learn about these people, you learn about people and you come up with ideas in your head of how you want to portray them, You
received an assignment at Studio 54, but before that, were you one that stood in line and tried to get in Studio 54?
Not really. I did out of curiosity, before I was assigned to go there. When it opened up, let's see, I think it was around May or June maybe of 1977. And, when it opened up, there were other places in the city that were popping up as well. But there was a place called Plato's Retreat in the Ansonia Hotel in New York, which was basically a swingers club, sex club.
Yeah.
So it was a really crazy time in New York. It was, in default almost. And, there was garbage strikes and police strikes and people, there was Son of Sam murders. And it was a very, very wild, crazy, Wild West time in New York City at that point. And so when Studio 54 opened up, it was like kind of had this reputation as being this wild drug, sex, just crazy place,
Right.
But something kind of interesting about it and fascinating. And also disco had just sort of appeared on the scene, with Saturday Night Fever, and that Bee Gees soundtrack, which everybody was listening to. So, I tried to get in on my own a few months after it opened up. And I couldn't get in. I just stood out there with my hand up in the air, and I was ignored all night.
Right.
So that was that. And then when I started working for The Voice, they assigned me to go there. So I was interested because I wanted to get inside. I wanted to see what was going on. So that night I was able to get in. And that's how it all started with that.
Was it, will you have carte blanche to photograph, to take photos of anything you wanted to inside the club?
Oh, yeah, sure. Places like, especially Studio 54, they thrived on the press and photographers. That was a big part of how they became so popular, because you would see something about Studio 54 almost every day or every other day, and, a photograph of some celebrity, at Studio 54. So they loved having photographers there.
Okay.
And, once you were in there, you could shoot whatever you wanted. It was your choice, what you wanted to shoot.
What people say about Studio 54, is it accurate or is it blown out of proportion? Is it saying that there's way too much that was really going on? It really wasn't that crazy, or was it that crazy?
I think it pretty much was that crazy.
Okay. It really was.
I think it pretty much was. It wasn't like it's depicted in some movies, like as people are just having, people are naked on the floor having sex, and doing, cocaine and whatever, right out in the open in front of you. That I didn't really see that. But if you walked around the corner to a dark corner, you would see something. Or if you went up to the balcony, that was kind of a famous place. Right. It was dark and it was kind of out of the way, you would see guys getting blowjobs and, you see a lot of stuff going down there. Coke was pretty much the drug of choice back then. So it wasn't unusual to see people just laying out lines of Coke on the table and snorting them. And it was going on, but it wasn't like, some people think it was just like a huge orgy,
right.
And it wasn't like that, but the shit was going down. Yeah.
For you, once you started shooting all these different clubs of Odyssey and Paradise Garage and Studio 54, did it become something that you look forward to go, man, I don't know what I'm going to get tonight to be able to shoot and what kind of pictures I'm going to get?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I also went to all the different clubs that I could basically go to that were happening at that point. It wasn't just Studio 54, but it seemed like there were clubs popping up like every other week somewhere, and some of them were gay clubs, some of them were straight, some of them were like more celebrity, some of the, they were all different. There was a Mud Club downtown, which was kind of like punk rock. There were different types of discos. And I wanted to, at that point, I wanted to do like a survey almost with my camera of like all the different club culture that was going on in New York at that time. Pretty much under the banner of disco, although it wasn't all necessarily disco, but that was the thing that was happening back then. The music the DJs, the sound systems, the mirrored ball, all that stuff. That was just really what was happening for like a couple of years in New York. And I was fascinated by it, and I was not fascinated so much by the celebrity aspect of it, because as a photographer who basically, I'm kind of a portrait photographer as well as a documentary photographer. But if I want to shoot a celebrity, I want to get them in my studio with lighting. I want to have time. I want to be able to talk to them. I don't want to like force my way up through a bunch of elbows, and shoot somebody sitting on a couch having a drink or something, that just didn't interest me, So what I was interested in was the culture, was the club culture at that time, and that was all. I was interested in the whole scene, everything that was out there.
What was it like going to Odyssey and seeing that famous dance floor that was in Saturday Night Fever? That I understand, is this true? Did somebody in California buy that for like a couple $1 million and put it in their house?
That's what I heard.
Wow.
Yeah. That's exactly what I heard. So somebody's got it in their basement, They probably have parties on Friday night. I mean, who knows? And that thing's iconic. I mean, after that movie, what was it like going there? It was really interesting because I had spent a lot of time in Manhattan going to a lot of these like Xenon and like even Regine's and, Paradise Garage and all these clubs that were serious clubs. I mean, this was, and also like a serious mix of people, like the gay culture was very prominent at discos because they kind of started it in a way back in Fire Island, back at places like the Loft in Manhattan with David Mancuso. So they had quite a strong influence, and they were very much a part of the scene. So, being around trans men and women was my first time experiencing that, and to see that, I mean, it was just, it was amazing to me. It was, and I, over time I gained a lot of, I don't know, like respect for that population for risking their lives, especially back then, walking around as, a man, if they're a woman, or vice versa, because that's who they felt they really were inside, and they didn't want to lie about their lives. They wanted to be true to themselves.
Right.
I have a lot of respect for them, and it's a big issue today in today's world, of course, as we all know. There's people who feel very strongly on both sides of that argument, but I gained a lot of respect for them. But so your question was about Odyssey, 2001 Odyssey. Yeah, and it was different because Odyssey is in a place called Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
Okay.
And that's about the most like kind of working class, Italian, maybe Irish. It is a real Brooklyn neighborhood, like way down there near the Verrazano Bridge, that goes across to Staten Island, really down in Brooklyn. And so it's a very different culture down there than it is in Manhattan. So, and the place itself that's in the movie, like when you go in it, it's a lot smaller than you think, and it's a lot sort of funkier than you think. It's not what you see on the screen. It's been really lit well and cleaned up and shot really interestingly. I mean, it's a pretty funky club.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't really see much of a diversity there at all. It was really like that Brooklyn white, middle class, Brooklyn, working class, Brooklyn crowd. Yeah. So it was interesting going there only because it was like almost like the Kunta Kinte of disco, but it certainly did not meet the expectations that I think most people had.
What do you think the fascination is of disco era and places like 2001 Odyssey and Studio 54? After all these years, there's people still so fascinated by this.
Yeah, that's a great question, honestly. disco actually, it never really died. It sort of went a little bit underground in the 80s, early 80s. And a lot of that had to do with the AIDS crisis, because people didn't want to go out at night. I mean, when you're dancing like that, you're sweating a lot. Back then it was kind of like, I don't know if I touch somebody who's sweating, could I get AIDS, And, so it sort of like went underground, and then it kind of moved to Chicago, and it became house music, and it moved to Detroit, it became techno. And then it really made a grand, exit to Europe, especially like the UK. And London and Manchester became like capitals of house music, basically. And they still are. But the scene itself kind of died off in New York in the early 80s. And I think what people are starting to realize is that it's not just John Travolta in a white suit, dancing on that floor, that it's music, first of all, that was stripped down and turned into house music, which is a lot of what the club culture today listens to.
Right.
And there's a big audience for house music today, huge. And I think people are finally going like, wow, this really is disco without the strings and the violins and the horns and all that stuff. This is just like brought down to like its tribal, beats, but it's really originating with disco music, And so there's that. And so there's like an acknowledgement of the music itself. And then there's also kind of an interest and fascination with the whole diversity and inclusion, and freedom of expression on the dance floor that people are learning about,
It's a great point right there.
Very unusual, very different. Very few times in history, certainly in my lifetime, have I seen that kind of diversity and inclusion and people mixing together so in such a friendly way, such a, party way, like the Wall Street banker dancing next to the trans woman from Puerto Rico, it just, I don't know. I'm from the Woodstock generation, and that was not the scene for me.
Were you even a fan of disco music? Or you just going? I mean, do you like the music?
I like some of it. I really liked the Bee Gees soundtrack when it came out. I like some artists. I like a lot of different. Like Michael Jackson did a couple of great songs. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, and Donna Summer and Gloria Gaynor, and a lot of groups did some songs that I like. But my heart is really back in rock and roll.
Gotcha.
It's always kind of been there. So I'm not a huge fan of disco. I have 1 million CDs, and like probably 3% of them are disco. But it was never about that for me. It was never really about the music. It was about the environment. It was about the scene. It was about the culture of it. It was about what I was seeing as a young photographer, just starting out, just getting my feet wet, basically, and having this whole world sort of open to me all of a sudden that I could go in and photograph. It was a gift.
You spent 15 years touring with Paul McCartney as his personal photographer. How did you get connected to get this gig?
Yeah. So let's see. After I did the disco thing, I kind of closed that up at the end of 1979, 1980. And then I was doing mostly portraiture work and magazine work for, like I started doing stuff for Elle magazine, portraits for them. I worked for a lot of different magazines doing portraits, and a lot of them some were very well-known celebrities. Some were just like, indie celebrities, and I managed to hook up with this PR company in New York called Rogers and Cowan. Some of your listeners will remember Rogers and Cowan or know about Rogers and Cowan. And I became really good friends with the guy who handled the music department at Rogers and Cowan. And he handled Paul McCartney. But Paul McCartney was like, he wasn't on tour at that point. It was right after he got busted for grass in Japan. So he was taking a little bit of a break, a little breather, sort some things out.
Right.
Yeah. So he wasn't really doing much. But I remember looking at this picture on Joe's wall, and it was Paul and Joe walking up this hallway in some venue somewhere. And I was like, wow, man, I'd love to work with him one day. And Joe said, if he goes out on tour again, I'll make that happen, And so a couple of years went by, and finally he went out on tour. And sure enough, Joe hired me for like 2 days to cover him, like doing some rehearsals and some little performance for press and stuff like that. So I met Paul. I had a chance to do a couple of sessions with him, like backstage. I met Linda. Linda, is like from the next town over from me, where I grew up, and she's a photographer, and so we hit it off like immediately. And Paul and I kind of hit it off immediately. I mean, I was a huge Beatle fan, So I mean, meeting him was like incredible to me, and he was still. I mean, he's great. I mean, but he was in peak form, and I loved. I was amazed that I was like able to work with him. It was like amazing. So I shot him for a couple of days, and then I remember going back the second day with some slides that I had processed and showing them to him, and he was like, "Wow, these are great," And as he's walking out, he says, "Would you like to come out on tour with me?" He was just about to go on tour, and I was like, "Yeah." So the next thing I know, I'm in LA at like a Sony soundstage, and he and the band are, just him, the band, and me, and like a bunch of his crew, his people, and he's rehearsing for his tour. I remember walking into this big soundstage, and they're doing like the second side of Abbey Road, and I'm just like goosebumps all over the place. Like, holy shit.
Am I really here doing this?
Am I really? And that's the voice, this isn't some cover band. Man. This is it, And I just like, holy shit, somebody, pinch me here. So that was how it started. And it was like kind of like a 1 week gig that turned into like 15 years of touring around with them.
Okay, everybody, I got something for you. I love being in the sun. I love being outside in the summertime. I do not mind the heat, but you also have to take care of your skin. And for a long time, I've been looking for a product that I could use on my skin that didn't make me feel like I just put on either some watered down version of something or something that was sticky that I did not like. I got news for you. I found it. 7 Minerals. Go to 7minerals.com. Their aloe vera gel is 99% organic aloe vera with no sticky residue. I purchased it. I tried it. I loved it. It made my skin feel smooth. It was the best feeling stuff I've put on my skin in a very long time. They also have an after sun aloe vera recovery and cooling. So there's a couple more products for you there. In addition to magnesium oil, which is nature's #1 miracle mineral. They have soap, stuff for the bath, rice water. Go to 7minerals.com. It's 100% natural products. Get yourself rejuvenated, get relief, reduce stress, and enjoy sleep. They got everything for you. I'm telling you, this product is absolutely fascinating. I love it. That's why I'm telling you about it. You guys have to go try this product out. 7minerals.com. Get the aloe vera gel. Your skin will thank you for it. What were the tricks for you then to capture great portraits of not just his performances, but his individual life when he's off stage? And how much access did you have to him away from performances?
I was told, just follow me everywhere.
Oh.
Just document me. So I've been like, he'll be on a phone call in his dressing room, and I'll walk in and photograph him talking on the phone. He's gone to the bathroom, and I've like walked in with him, because he's talking to me, and he'll say like, "Hey, shoot a picture," So it was pretty much like free reign. Do whatever you want to do that you think will look good. One of the things was like when you sign up for someone like Paul McCartney, you give them like a lot of permission to like edit your things.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have free reign. I had free reign to shoot whatever I wanted, but I didn't have free reign to publish whatever I wanted.
Sure.
So he knew that I wasn't going to publish anything, that he didn't want, but he'd let me shoot whatever I wanted. So I got to hang with him all the time. It was just amazing. He'd have meetings with whoever, Steve Jobs would walk in, or Prince, or, whoever. And it would be the two of them and me, It was crazy.
That is crazy. That is like lifetime experiences that just keep going on repeat, but add another person into the picture.
Yeah.
Bill, I was looked at a lot of your portraits, and what I really love about him is, what is your secret to capturing these A-list, high-profile celebrities, but they appear in your portraits as they're completely unguarded?
I don't really know what I do. People have told me that before, that I do that. They look very comfortable. They look unguarded. I'm not sure what I do. I just do what I do. I think I'm probably not. I don't come off as being like some serious like directing force that's telling them what to do. I try to engage them in like an open conversation. And if I come up with an idea, I'll present it to them. Hey, how about you leaning against that wall over there, the brick wall, and whatever, whatever I'm thinking. And I work, it's a collaborative thing. So I think they're responding to the openness that I'm presenting to them,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to be light, I try to have a light touch with people, I guess, and I think they feel relaxed, they somehow get comfortable. I think I pick up like vibes pretty easily or something, with people. If I feel like somebody's not into something and I can sense it from body language or whatever, I'll either try to like make them comfortable, or I'll say, okay, let's go over here now, just like switch it up, Sometimes you have very little time to work with people, like with McCartney, I had years. So, I could do many different things, but I've been thrown into situations where I have like 5 minutes to get like a cover, of somebody. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
You gotta be like forceful and somewhat aggressive, I guess, but you also have to be gentle. So it's a delicate tiptoe and balance there.
Whatever you're doing, it's working for sure, because it comes out in your portraits.
Thanks.
What was it like for you speaking at the Library of Congress in 2017 on your work?
That was really an honor for me. I don't know, Library of Congress, what a great opportunity. What happened was the Library of Congress, they inducted Gloria Gaynor's song, I Will Survive, into their collection of records. They have a very selective collection of music going back to like, probably early like mountain music in Appalachia to, jazz to, like a real American music. So inducting her music from that era, a woman, there were a lot of things that were kind of like new about that. And so they made it into a pretty big like weekend event, and they invited me because I just got my first book published on it, which was called Disco. It was published by Real Art Press in London. And they invited a couple of other people. One person wrote a book on that time period. Another person was a professor at NYU about culture, about, young, like not just dance culture, but a culture expert. And so the three of us, had a presentation and a talk, and it was really, it made me feel like people were really paying attention to this time period in a way that was more than like just the music, just, the hairstyle or the clothes, but also something else that was really special about it, That made me feel really good.
Listeners, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to not just Bill's website, but also to another website where you can get your hands on prints and some of his books. He has one, Each One Believing Paul McCartney on stage, off stage, and backstage. He mentioned the book Disco, the Bill Bernstein photographs, and also in 2021, The Last Dance, collection of portraits that illustrate the essence of disco's euphoric spirit. The first print sold out in 2 months. So now there is a second print that came out with a different hardcover on the image. Yeah. How difficult was it for you to choose from all the pictures you have on which ones to include in this book?
It was, well, it was interesting because when I originally shot this stuff, it was published in this book in 1980 by Random House that was kind of like a guidebook to discos back then. But it was 1980, and basically, as I mentioned before, disco was kind of on its way out. So they printed it. They were like, wow, this is going to be great. And like nothing happened with this book. But something actually did happen behind the scenes, which is that book became like a cult classic, much to my not knowing that. And people were collecting that book and studying it. There were pictures and there were articles and stuff about the people who went to those clubs, how much drinks cost at Studio 54, and, conversations that the writer that I went with, she would talk to people and have conversations about, who they were and their culture and stuff. So the book became kind of a cult classic, and that's how I reconnected with it, because a music person in London contacted me in like 2002, I think it was, and said, I have your book and I'd like to, it's this tiny little travel book. It should be like a big picture book because people are really interested in this. And he said, would you be interested in that? I said, yeah, like absolutely. So he managed to put it together and get a book deal. And now that's Disco. So I had to go through an edit for that in 2015 to get those pictures. And so I was basically looking at 400 or 500 rolls of film and going through all the contact sheets and picking things that I thought were really represented to me, things that I saw that were unusual, like looking at them today. It was like, just, seeing some of the trans women dancing on speakers next to like a regular couple standing there talking. The people who got really dressed up for the events. There's just a lot of craziness going on the dance floor. And I wanted to show that, because I think a lot of people today think that they've invented club culture. Like you go to some of these big events now and they have like dancers and, all kinds of stuff going on. And they think that they've created this. And it really started back in the 70s, So when COVID happened, I decided to do my own book. So I picked a lot of pictures that were in the disco book, but I also added new pictures that weren't in that, So I did another round of going through my negatives and found a couple of really great ones.
Go to BillBernstein.com, or for books and fine art prints, go to BillBernsteinFineArt.com. I'll put links in the show notes to both those for you. I would like for you to speak about a portrait at Studio 54. It's a couch. There's like two guys and a girl on the couch, and another guy is sitting on top of the couch. It's like this really cool picture, but I don't know if it was staged or you just caught him at this moment, but it's a really cool picture.
Yeah. That's Studio 54. That's a couch shot. To me, it's like the queen bee, surrounded by her
harem.
or something. Her harem, yeah. I mean, she's just like the center of attention. She's, she's eyeing the crowd. They're kind of one guy's whispering in her ear. And so what happened was I was watching those, they came as a group. I think it's like 5 or 6 people. They came as a group that night, and I remember watching them dance. And I have some pictures of like 2 guys kind of sandwiching the girl as they're dancing, and then 3 guys huddled together dancing. And it was a real sort of like it was a real amorphous group. It was a real non-binary almost,
Okay.
early non-binary, gender fluid, I guess, or just, I wasn't sure who was with who or what was really going on, but they were so interesting, and they were so representative of a certain type of person that would go to Studio 54, at that day. So I started shooting them dancing, and then they all kind of sat on the couch, and I walked over and I snapped a couple of pictures. And I think one of the guys maybe got up. I don't remember if he was on the floor or where he was, but he sort of like jumped on the back of the couch. And so they kind of were posing for me a little bit for that picture. But I mean, it was a very quick moment of time, but I thought it captured the essence of that group. And that
it
kind
does.
of clique,
Yes.
that one strong woman there, sexy, strong, with this group of, androgynous guys. It's just, I don't know. There it is.
Saw that and I'm like, wow, that is a great photo. Whether it's staged or not, it kind of sets the tone of this is what Studio 54 was.
Yeah. It was fashion. It was drugs. It was a celebrity. It was a place to be seen. It was posers, definitely posers. I mean, it was one of the big poser places, I would say, in New York. Other places weren't quite like that.
Talk about some of your exhibits that I think are still going around the world.
Yeah. Let's see. I've had a number of great things happen. Like right now, I'm trying to think what's going on. There's a thing, there's the Vitra Design Museum, which they make furniture, like high-end artful furniture. And they have a museum of contemporary culture. And they put together these exhibits. And they did an exhibit on nightlife, which showed the clubs themselves, the people, the style, the scenery, all of the elements of that time period. And they licensed a lot of my pictures, along with other people's, speakers and from that time period and sound systems and things like that, just to give you a glimpse of what it felt like to be back then. But that toured all over the world. That was in Berlin and Amsterdam and Spain and UK. I mean, it was all over. I don't think it came to America, actually, interestingly enough, but it's all over the place for like 4 years. So that happened. I also had my work featured at the Museum of Sex.
Oh,
in New York City, which that was supposed to be like a 2-month thing, and that turned into like 2 years. They created a whole environment for my pictures, and they would have parties like on Friday and Saturday night that actually tended to be really crazy, wild parties. They had a DJ booth, and they had a speaker system, and it really had a feeling of like kind of an underground club back in the 70s, So that was really interesting. I have a gallery in London called the David Hill Gallery, and they feature my work there. I had a show for like a few weeks last year at Defected Records in London, which is a house music label over there. And they have a traveling thing called Glitterbox, and they go to Ibiza and all over the place and have events. And it was a couple of weeks. That was a lot of fun. I talked and I showed my work and, met a lot of people. And I've got some things coming up. I was just in Barcelona like last month talking at Soho House over there. I was invited over there by an event called Drop, DROP, and Soho House coordinated with me, and I did a presentation of my work in that time period, because people are really, especially like younger people, are very interested in it, having never been there but heard about it and just curious about it. You know, like what was really going on there. And then there's older people who actually were there who love to hear about it and relive it. You know, so there's those two groups. And right now, honestly, I've sort of gotten more and more into it recently because there's been so much more interest in it. It was sort of like, I guess that work was kind of my side hustle for a while, you know, while I was out doing other stuff. But I mean, it's kind of almost becoming like more of my main thing. And I'm talking to people about getting some sponsorship, you know, like a liquor company or something like that to sponsor me going around giving talks and showing my pictures. And
That'd be fun.
yeah. I'd love to do it. I love to talk about it. I love to tell stories. Love to show my work. Love to hear people's comments about that time period or what they feel about the club culture today. You know, and so why not follow your passion? You know, that's what I love to do.
I hope that takes off. I think you're onto something there. I think that would sell out. I think a lot of people would love to hear your stories on all the photos you've taken and stuff like that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting because it's like it started just coming to me. I never thought about doing it, but it slowly started coming to me. And the more I got into it, the more I talked about it and heard people's questions and showed my work and just the things that it triggers off in people. And also, honestly, like I look around the world today, especially in America, and the pushback on like, you know, young kids who are, you know, experiencing so much pushback from, you know, the whole trans thing, even the LGBTQ thing, you know, that all the, you know, I don't know, the pushback, I guess is the word, on all that stuff, you know, like years ago, there was, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, there was the equal marriage amendment, you know, now they're trying to take that away, you know, it's just, I don't know. It seems like let people be who they are. Mm-hmm. Like no one's hurting anybody. No one's bothering anybody.
Right.
You know, what's your problem, man? You know, let's just let it happen. You know, no one's hurting anybody. Take the freaking guns away if you're going to do anything. I mean, I'd take them away. I'm not like, you know, I just mean like, let's put some good red flag laws and all that kind of stuff, you know?
Was Paradise Garage, from everything that I have studied and looked into, was it this massive sound system that basically felt like was going through you, and it was in the basement of was it an old garage? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was. It was actually on the first floor. It was, you go up the ramp when you get there. You know, when you get to the garage, you drive up the ramp to the, well, it's actually the second floor. Well, it started off being like the second floor of this old garage. And then I think they took over the third floor you know, years later, like in the 80s. But when I started going there, it was just that one floor. And it was, as you say, exactly that. It was like the world's best sound system. It was absolutely crazy good. And it was Larry Levan, who was the DJ back then, who people have like started discovering.
Yes.
Who was the genius mind behind it, not just in terms of the music and being a selector, but in terms of like making this really unfriendly acoustic room into like an incredible space for sound by positioning the speakers differently, by actually inventing speakers that would deal with, you know, certain frequencies that would work in that room. You know, he was constantly going out at the end of the night and repositioning speakers, you know. It had the most amazing sound in it. I mean, as you walk up that ramp, you could feel it like coming, the floor was vibrating, so your feet were vibrating from the bass. The bass was amazing. And it would vibrate all the way up your body. And finally, when you got to the top, it was just blasting. And it was a packed room, you know, and it took 10 minutes to get from one side of the room to the other. And it was, aside from that sound system, there was this great DJ there who really knew how to work the crowd. He really was picking up on where the crowd was at the moment and what they needed. Did they need more, R&B stuff? Did they need, something out of the ordinary? Did they need throw in little stones, throw in, a little deep cut of some disco thing, He had such a vast knowledge of music and would just use it. And it was just such an unusual place. It was crazy unusual. And it's now finally getting the recognition that it deserves.
Bill, thanks so much for your time coming on the show, telling some stories. I hope you get that off the ground and people pay attention to BillBernstein.com, because if this gets going, you're going to have to go out and check this out. Thanks for your time.
Okay, man. Thank you very much, Tommy. Appreciate it.
You are welcome. Listeners, do me a favor. Take 30 seconds, rate and review the show. All I need you to do is click 5 stars, list some nice comments, and click enter, and that's it. And it helps me grow this show immensely. That's going to do it for this episode of Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.
That's good.